Testing, testing, one, two, three. Is anyone hearing anything now? Please tell me there's some sound. Uh, all right, let's do this all over again. Uh, Welcome, creatives, community, and kind folks. Today is World Building Wednesday, and today we are, or well, the entire week we're talking about limitations and micro worlds, in which we delve into a um, a microcosm of the world in which you are located. And that microcosm could be something like, let's go into subterranean world, or aquatic location, or a place that causes traumatic psychological horror or whatever. Essentially, limiting the space, limiting a limit of the capabilities, and a delve into maybe some of the underutilized mechanics of whatever role-playing game you're having, and or using a location in your world or your setting that severely limits the capabilities of the player characters and yourself, maybe due to particular adversaries or story elements and whatnot. And micro worlds, the limitation in micro worlds part is setting a limitation up for um, any and everyone at the table, both in a meta sense, meaning the rules that you're using, the mechanics that you're using, and narratively as well. So, with World Building Wednesday, I thought we would talk about, for those who don't know, on World Building Wednesday, we take a world or the subject we're talking about, and we shape a world around it. Whatever concept we're talking about, whether it's something as simple as, dragons or celestials or giants, or something more meta, like we're talking now about micro worlds and limitations. Now, before we start designing our own, I do want to bring up maybe one or a few role-playing game settings that really encapsulate this effect. And one of them for me is um, yeah, yeah. Rickard says world building with micro worlds, the starting village. Yeah, yeah. You start out in a village. That I think the only way you could get smaller than that is you're all in a tavern, right? Don't even describe what's outside the doors. You're all in a tavern, and someone walks in and hands you a map. you know that kind of thing. He goes on to say you have to make it a bounded zone to give the players a good starting point without overwhelming them, but still needs to feel like it's a lived-in world. And one of the this isn't an argument of whether it's good or bad to use it, but just talking about um, whether how we can use limitations to either our benefit and some of the pitfalls in using those same limitations. And I love the idea of a bounded location and even bounding yourself as a creator, because then it's um it's an easy way for both the players and yourself to understand how the world is created, right? And an example would be in the age of using our real world examples, in the age of exploration. If you, for example, lived in Victorian England, then that would be your bounded location. That's how the culture is there, the society is there, languages, dress, all that kind of stuff. But if you were to take a tramp freighter down into, the jungles of Africa, or sail halfway around the world to Japan, sure, those locations do exist, but you as an individual did not know they existed, and what the cultural and physical and exploration and ramifications would be. So now your world starts to expand, and so that your bounded location expands well beyond that. And when we talk about this in, say, classic role playing, Dungeons and Dragons, adventuring, fantasy, starting off in the village, starting out at a tavern, you have an idea of, even if it's very subtle or it's fuzzy on the edges, you're like, okay, I'm in a village, I'm in a tavern, no big deal. And then when the game master wants to introduce the chaos to you, once you walk outside the door, then your world starts to expand beyond that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like Rickard says, a starting village tends to have, well, I don't know, a village and some cave or ruin, etc. For adventure close to the village. It, keep on the borderlands, anyone? Right? And so, yeah. And Tesla says, oh, and stores, yeah, blacksmith, a place to buy supplies, maybe a place to purchase other small consumables or something. But I do want to bring up a role playing game that deals with micro worlds. And I understand that some of you might be thinking, like, I might be bringing up Rifts. For those who don't know, Palladium Games Rifts, and I believe it's been ported over into Savage Worlds. Rifts is a game where, in general, these dimensional portals, these rifts open up on Earth and disgorge. They vomit all their crap onto Earth's planet surface, and then you have go forth an adventure. But I would say a game that's more inclined to what I'm referring to is a game called Torg. Yeah, Rickard says basically, he had talked about the stores and some cave nearby. Rickard says basically one place to handle downtime and one place for adventure. Exactly. Hasn't that been nearly like 99% of most adventure styled modules or something? Hey, you start off in a nondescript location, and hey, go to this walk the dotted line and go to this place to knock on the front door to have adventure, right? Your home. There's an island that you should explore. You're home, and there's a cave nearby. You're home, and if you just go through the mountain pass, you'll discover a new land, right? Yeah. Very rarely are you're in the adventure. Why don't you leave this one adventure to go to the other adventure? It usually doesn't work that way. Yes, there's more to it than that. If in your own setting, and of course, there's a reason why it's created that way, because the module. The people who create the adventures, the modules, the adventure paths don't know what your setting is like, so they can't make assumptions about that. Yep. Yeah, Ricker says, yeah, that's a fair point. Most adventure modules are micro worlds in a way. Yeah, they're just a series. They happen to be a long linked series of nondescript village next to adventure location front door, right? Deadman says the PC game Deadlands had a tavern where you kept all your extra characters, though the full game covered most of 1400s Germany. Yeah, I did not know that. Darklands. I'm sorry, I said Deadlands. I meant Darklands. Darklands. Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah, a lot of video games have a more of the role playing style. Usually have a location for you to keep all your crap, which again is the safe nondescript location that we were talking about. But there's a role playing game called Torg, and it's been in a number of iterations. And Torg, again, is Earth with a bunch of rifts that open up and disgorge, vomit up a bunch of crap on Earth. But in Torg, the dimensional rifts also include a mechanism by which, when you enter the locations where the dimensional rifts is blended with Earth, the rules of the game actually change by encouraging your players, encouraging the characters and therefore the players to benefit in acting in a particular way based on where the rift is located. And that's a complicated way of saying, like, Torg was designed as an excuse, a meta excuse, to have different types of role-playing games all taking place on the same planet, all at the same time. So, for example, there was a rift that opened up in Africa, and it was very pulp action, khaki, khaki or bare-chested wearing Indiana Jones style, um, dark savages and dinosaurs and punching people in the throat and swinging through the trees kind of thing. And so you would get a mechanical advantage by acting in a manner in which you became like a two-fisted hero with a scantily clad, young woman wrapped around your thigh or something. Whereas there was other locations where there was a rift in time and space, and maybe you would have an advantage on using stealth and deception, or you would have an advantage on social interactions over combat, or you would get certain bonuses on using firearms rather than melee weapons, or so on and so forth. Yeah, Dead Man says Steam has the game for $7. Darklands, 1400s, dark Germany. But one thing about creating a world, a world created with micro worlds is, first, of course, you have to have the reason why. It could be very mundane, meaning like, it's the age of sail, the age of piracy and privateers, or the age of exploration, and you're on a ship and you're going from island to island, and every time you go to a different island, the rules change a little bit. It could be something that it could be the example of the unexplained accident, right? Dimensional rifts, chaos storms, radiation, battle of the gods, the downfall of an ancient but powerful civilization that left behind their debris and effluvia or something. It could be any reason where PCs start in mundane, semi-blurry village, and then when they go off, the rules of their interaction change with the world. Now, I didn't want to bring this up too early because we do have Future Friday, but one of the concepts, one of the main tropes of science fiction is, of course, going from planet to planet. Now, that planet could be Star Trek wise, Star Wars / Star Trek wise, where you get in a starship and you travel from planet to planet, habitat to habitat. It may be Stargated, Pandora Gate style, where go through wormhole, teleportation, Pandora Gate, whatever, however you want to describe it, and yet it's the same thing. You go from world to world, planet to planet, right? Science fiction has embraced this quite a bit. So whereas you arrive in said location, and although you may be relatively equipped to handle a number of generalized strange habitats and locations. Yep, Dead Man says like the Orville going from world to world. Exactly. The PCs are traveling around in their neutral location, right? the starship, the tramp freighter, the whatever. And then when they arrive, sure, they might have a laundry list of like a couple of 8 different ways to handle things. Like, we know how to handle zero gravity or light gravity or a harsh atmosphere. But the confluence of a number of things, plus, of course, you have to have some reason why they're there. Maybe there's something alien that's there. So science fiction has embraced this quite a bit. For fantasy, other than, say, the game I brought up, Torg, for fantasy, the closest I think that we've come to really embracing micro worlds would be Planescape, in which, and I was going to bring up Spelljammer. Thank you, Dead Man. Yeah, the Spelljammer boat that can fly in space, right? Despite the oddity, or even the craziness of taking a sailing vessel and flying it through the air quotes vacuum of space, which technically it really isn't a vacuum. You are still traveling in something, and you are going, every time you arrive someplace else, you're in another micro world, right? And that other micro world does not necessarily need to be a world at all. You're in a sailing vessel with a flying airship going through the the vastness of space, and you arrive with a derelict, another derelict vessel that looked like it was in battle. Right there is your micro world. And one of the tenets that I really think I wanted to bring up about creating micro worlds is that both narratively and the rules change, um, even if subtly, when the player characters involve themselves in the micro world. Now, yesterday I brought up the idea of you can just overlay one simple rule. Like, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, you might say, hey, let's pull out the insanity rules because that's horror, right? The insanity rules in horror or something. Okay. Is that changing the rest of the game? No. But will that change how the players interact with their location? Well, the answer is hell yes, right? Because now when they see the creatures, the 20-foot creature's chest split open, and there's internal organs and eyeballs and tongues and a couple of extra limbs spilling out of it, and they have to make a sanity check. Things change a lot when that paladin and that barbarian were like, I was going to smite it, but now I think I might have to turn tail and run, either narratively because they're like, I'm getting the hell out of here, or they want to save their own sanity and say, hey, I don't want to even have to make a roll or lose sanity points or whatever the case may be. Or lastly, they start failing their checks, whether you're using saving throws or something like that. And again, causing them to change their interaction with the world. And there's nothing wrong with having that changes in interaction. But of course, as always, we talking heads like to suggest session 0. Talk it over with your players. You don't have to give away your adventure, but talking to them by saying, hey guys, there are these little used rules, or I'm going to insert various rules that are going to change the way the game is done, which might change your capabilities. It might even, I hate this term, might even nerf your abilities. But if you are creative or adventurous, or you're bored, and if that paladin wants to smite yet one more enemy and not think of maybe some other options and some other capabilities or something, this is what we're going to do. And you guys know I'm the self-appointed third pillar-ist of the tabletop community. I love the pillar of exploration, that third pillar, and so that's kind of my way of like weaving this idea of limitations and micro worlds. Sure, everything is cool on a flat plane, but maybe things change when you're on a rope bridge versus underwater or something. And like yesterday, brought up the idea of an underwater exploration, right? And and I read the rules for it, at least what 5th edition has above board, and you start scratching your head like, ooh, I thought that would sound fun, but maybe that isn't as fun as I thought it would be, right? So there are times where on the surface something sounds really cool, but then when you really deal with the ramifications, either narratively and or mechanically, you might go, I don't know how I want to insert this, or maybe we might have to do something to accommodate my particular gaming table, right? Like, for example, the rules in only under specific set of circumstances does a player character operate optimally underwater, according to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. If you don't follow into those that narrow path, you basically have disadvantage on every single attack, both ranged and melee combat. In addition to which, there are some narrative things to think about. Do dwarves or constructs sink to the bottom of oceans, or can they swim? Can you cast a spell underwater, or if you cast a verbal component spell, do you just suck down water the first time you do it? You get to do it once and you start drowning. What happens when someone drops to 0 hit points and you try to heal them? Do they instantly wake up, take a suck in a gallon of fluid and then start drowning again? Or can you stabilize someone who it's all these other little things that start happening? Using lightning bolt versus a fireball underwater. a ton of other narrative things to think about, and then thinking of how to manipulate them into the mechanics. In which, is that something your group wants to get into? Like, we love the nuance and the heart, the trouble that it brings. We are a resource group. um I'm looking at you, Dark Sun, as a any post-apocalyptic game where you have to track your resources, right? Is your group that type of group where you're like, you know what, I really want my smitey paladin, and my axe wielding barbarian to have to think about what they're going to do, at least for a one off, right? Or is your group like, nah, can we just hand wave that stuff away and not deal with all the failings and penalties and keeping track of food and keeping track of ammunition and keeping track of exhaustion, or any number of things. Again, we're going to talk about this for Future Friday, but there's you, you know the television show, The Expanse, is very keen about dealing with certain things, whether it's light gravity or zero gravity, whether it's radiation and communication, whether you're having drift or you're falling into an atmosphere, and a bunch of other things, it, layered underneath the story that's taking place in the first place, right? And so some game tables might find it complicated to, like, listen, all I want to do is hit the bad guy with my smite. Do I really have to worry about treading water and drowning and swimming and worrying about 360 degrees around me and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, in world building, I think one of the great things about having a world with micro worlds in it when designing a micro world would be that, again, you get a great chance to change things up. Things get to change a bit, whether it's a mosaic world created by the gods where a desert literally has a hard line that stops right up against the jungle, as if it was designed by children that just put puzzle pieces together, or the player characters are much like the Green Lantern Corps, where they are agents who must keep back the chaos of these other worlds, and the player characters must step through, much like Stargate or any of these other things, where they are the law to bring order to chaos and delve into these other realms or worlds. Or maybe it's an accident. Another micro world setting would be something like Sliders. Anybody remember that old television show where each episode, basically making fun of like the monster of the week kind of thing, the player characters slide from place to place, dumping themselves into a place where they must explore. Here we go with the exploration pillar, right? They must explore their world and understand, okay, we understand how the rules work where we're from. How do the rules work where we're at? Right? Time travel stories have a lot to do with this. Time travel stories are far more socially designed as micro worlds rather than very, very physical ones, but they still count, right? Hey, we came from the modern era and we got dumped back into the prehistoric past. Okay, now we're in the Victorian era. Oh, wait a minute, now we've been dumped into the far future. Ooh, now we've been, dumped into something BC, and the Roman Empire or whatever, and you can start sliding back and forth through time. Time travel stories are limitations in micro worlds, dealing with those kind of things. And remember, it's not just the mechanical part of it. I love the mechanical part of it, the switching, the changing, the, hey, yesterday my stealth and intimidation skills were optimized, but now they're not, based on where we're located. But narratively, again, there may be a thing, right? Like if you're playing an investigative Call of Cthulhu story, let's be honest, 1920s America, for say someone of my particular persuasion, say, I don't know, Midwest, Western Texas or something, might be a little bit different than, say, modern era investigation, right? There are certain eras where certain individuals in our own real world in one era might be quite optimized, and in another era might be severely limited based socially. And of course, like Ricker said, yeah, it sucked. It sucked bad. Yeah. Um, yeah, no rope neckties for me. Thank you. No, thank you. And yes, I'm being facetious, but I'm being very sarcastic. But my point being is that that kind of concept, fantasy wise, let's go back in our fantasy gaming. Sure, in the modern era of your fantasy gaming, that your tieflings and dragonborn might be just another person walking into the tavern. Although I'm not exact sure in your maybe your dragonborn drinks alcohol, although I don't know, maybe something different. They might be wanting to drink something different. Bartender pulls out, I don't know, alcohol laced blood or something. I'm being dumb, but yeah, sure. Maybe in your modern era or your village, there, Rickard, your village with the tavern and a couple of stores to buy things from. Sure, you're an average person, right? And yeah, they've got armor there for the old dragonborn. Like, oh, we've got extra large in the back. Here, let me go find a breastplate for you. But when you leave, how are you treated narratively? Maybe you go somewhere and there's literally no humans. They've never seen humans before, and lizard folk are like, "Hey, Dragonborn, give me a hug, there, buddy. Thank you." Intertwining their old snake-like tongues with each other, saying hello, and the humans are just like, "Ooh, what the hell?" And of course, the lizard folk are like, "Hey, glad you brought food. We didn't bring anything to the party. Sorry." Uh, the other PC is like, "I'm not food. Full arm fold, I'm a paladin. I'm not food." Although I guess the Dragonborn could be a paladin too. But you get my point, right? That even narratively, things could change. Region to region, based on your world. So, let's design this limiting and micro world setting. So, um, let's. How about, since we've got Planescape is one that's already been created. Um, yeah, Tesla puts in quote, "Okay, I don't know how it works across the pond, but I'm black. There is literally no point in history where it's going to be awesome for me." Rufus from Timeless. Yeah, yeah. Was Timeless was a television show where the agents go through time to they are going through time to stop another bad guy or something who's trying to change time, and they're trying to keep things from being altered too bad. And yeah. Well, maybe there's certain locations throughout time. Maybe it might work. Say, oh, I don't know, the heyday of Chicago's really really bad project housing. I think I might have an advantage there for some of you lighter persuaded individuals as part of the group, right? I, yeah, maybe there might be. I'm genetically quite divergent from my say African brothers and sisters, but I don't know. I might have a point, uh, um, a point or two on the D20, maybe to socially navigate my way around. Even though I'm psychologically I'm just like I'm as lost as you guys, right? But yeah, that there's a possibility. But yeah, you're right. Like it is true. Like you're like yeah. Yeah, there's literally no point in history that's going to be awesome. And mind you, depending on the kind of world, like some players really don't. I know it sounds. I know this might be sounding strange to some of you guys, but there's some players that are out there. I'm going to pick with you, Dragonborns or Tieflings. There's some players out there who don't like the idea that their character. It's literally um, hitting you over the head with racism, right? Although I didn't mean to go down this pathway, but I've even seen threads where people have said, well, my tiefling or my dragonborn is a paladin. Why would somebody hate my character? That makes no sense. And I'm like, because you look different. That's what racism is. That's where hatred comes from in a fantasy setting as well, because technically they're different species, I suppose. Well, if they can breed together, I don't know, whatever. Scientifically, it doesn't matter. People, that's the whole point of hate, right? Hate doesn't have to make sense. Hate just is. So sure, you may look different, and depending on where you go in these different regions of your setting, for example, during let's have the Age of Sail, and the player characters are all a motley crew on a ship, and they go off and sail through the world, much like motley crew of characters, let's say in Star Wars, or motley crew of characters in traveling the universe in Guardians of the Galaxy, right? When they arrive somewhere, yeah, like Rickard says, racism 101, it looks different, burn it. Yeah, one person in the back raising her hand like, they don't look that different to me. And everyone's like, shut up. You're supposed to hate them, shut up. which yeah, the point of that is, that I'm bringing up is, mind you, you don't have to, every micro world, whether it's different islands or different dimensions or something, you don't have to instantly go, oh, what, we have 6 different character race options. How about we have hate for each one of them? You don't have to do it that way. But there could be class structures. There could be historical significance and why people are treated differently. For example, in village, your basic village and tavern, the PCs leave the tavern. Sure, the paladin might be well respected where they are. I've got a 17 charisma. I don't understand why anybody dislikes me. I'm the greatest guy in the world. And then they leave to another realm in which there have been, this is the 5th, massacre by your knight's order that slew these people for generations. And when you arrive, you represent the heavy hand of the law. And so, sure, you might not think they're the way they do, but they see you as an agent of harm. Oh my God, maybe I wanted this to be a safe spot. It seems like I'm inadvertently bumping up against current issues today, and I didn't really particularly want to do that. I wanted this to be a break from the norm, so apologize for that. But you get my point, right? Now, when it comes to mechanical changes, the easiest way to do a mechanical change is to simply do an overlay. Overlay change, like using sanity rules. Ravenloft is a perfect example of a micro world, right? Ravenloft setting is basically, oh, you stumble into Ravenloft, done, right? I guess you could in your setting, you could make Ravenloft an island. You could put Ravenloft as an interdimensional thing, like a micro dimension. I suppose you could make Ravenloft, it's always on the other side of some kind of mountain range or something. If you wanted to do that, Ravenloft could be on a floating island if you have a world of airships or something. So you could always put Ravenloft somewhere else, but Ravenloft has its own overlay with a number of different rules. Much like we were talking about the Tomb of Annihilation adventure path for Wizards of the Coast, yeah, like Deadman says, you walk into a forest and now you are in Ravenloft, right? That's literally the excuse to get into Ravenloft, and the rest of it, and we all understand that, right? We understand that as players and game masters. Like, you know what? Let's not dwell on why or how you got there. You just got there. Let's go adventuring, and then at some point, let's get out of there, right? Like Rickard says, I swear, whenever someone in here says law, all I hear is Sylvester Stallone. I am the law. Hey, yo, Rickard, don't even, yeah. I can't do a good Sylvester Stallone. I can do a good Jersey, but I can't do a good Sylvester Stallone. Yeah, there's a little bit of a slur in a kind of a Jersey talk. I reckon the same thing with bees and Nick Cage. Yeah. Don't make me do a Nick Cage. That's a little way out there for me. For those who don't know, and I'm surprised if you've been here for the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes. um, Thank you there, Rickard. Um, this show is TriCast over 3 platforms, our own Discord server, YouTube, and Twitch. So if you wanted to involve yourselves into the show in any of those or all of those platforms, you may do so as you wish. Now, the an overlay of rules is like, oh, hey, today we're going to use uh, in this part of the world, we're going to use sanity checks. In this other part of the world, we're going to use, we're going to keep track of rations and exhaustion, right? And now, mind you, sometimes you might have to manipulate your world rules, right? For example, there I hear in the gaming community, we all are like clamoring for why don't they do this old and fill in the blank, right? Why don't they have Planescape? Why don't they have Dark Sun? Why haven't they brought back Mystara? Why haven't they brought back Greyhawk or something? And the reason why they haven't, this is my particular opinion, why they haven't brought back Dark Sun is because 5th edition has moved well away from the survivalist style of gaming. Sure, we've seen them in their Unearthed Arcana releases that they're talking about psionics and the variations on psionics and such like that. But what people aren't seeing is that they're going to have to heavily modify their own game system because it's modified for cinematic gaming. In essence, there's an easy button to survive out in the wild, and Dark Sun is built around survival. Now, I know there are some players who are like, "Hey, I want to be in Dark Sun," but whether they know it or not, they don't want to keep track of food. They don't want to be in a world where metal doesn't exist and it is extremely rare. Where they don't want to know that create food and water, Lehman's tiny hut. What's another one? A good berry, etc. It doesn't exist, right? Hell, even the use of magic in Dark Sun, for the most part, destroys life, and those who use magic are, hunted down and even hated and or killed outright. Rickard brings up other examples of perfect that I thank you very much for reminding me because I didn't write any notes, but I was thinking about it. It's like other examples to use instead of insanity and or rations are like face, honor, infamy, debt. What are some other words we can use? Reputation, renown. What's the game that uses this? Legend of the Five Rings, right? So let's go back to the Age of Sail. Your character comes from some sort of Victorian style England or something, or maybe it was before that. Anyway, in the book Shogun, Europeans sailed to Japan, right? In our gaming community, it would be us, a pseudo medieval European character concepts traveling to an ancient Japanese styled world, right? When they arrive, whether the characters know it or not, the players are now inserting themselves into a micro world where face and honor are extremely important, where maybe even face is far more important, or is just as important as honor. So your smitey knight, while on one level, very, very much in line with, say, Japanese honor, may not understand what face means. Might be more likely to understand it than, say, your roguey types. But you get my point, right? So yes, the player characters could literally travel from a literal island, sailing on sailing vessels, arrive in another island, and maybe now we're going to start tracking, like you say, like honor or debt or infamy, even. Oh, you're those I don't know, Outlanders or something like that. We don't like you, Outlanders. And now the PCs might be starting from a negative point, right? They represent the infamous because they represent the historical um, machinations of the people that came before them, and now they have to deal with that. Um, there's some other, why is my brain not working with some other metrics to answer for now, mind you, some of these other metrics that you might be measuring, or keeping track of or instituting in a particular world, again, could be one-offs. For example, um, let's say player um, player characters go to a world. Let's go with chaos magic, right? So you say, hey, in my world, my setting, whenever the players go through another dimensional portal, magic changes. Great. Okay. So in setting A, when people use a spell, it's like a beacon that summons those blind displacer beasts that hunt them down through the city streets. Okay. So when magic is cast, they use these hunter animals or dogs or blind agents or something, but they can smell magic. They can almost see it, and they go around hunting down mages because mages have blasted the landscape and people hate magic here. Great, okay, cool. Then in another world, they say whenever you cast magic, you're drawing you are building up chaos in and around you, and everyone knows that at some point it's going to explode out of you. Like it's almost like a bolt of chaos lightning that's going to strike you, and something strange is going to happen, right? You might be engulfed in flame, or turn into a goat, or be covered in piles of gemstones, or something silly like that, right? Or you know, it could be very gonzo, or maybe it's something like, at some point there might be backlash from using magic. Maybe you go to another micro world where it's very difficult to pull on the threads of magic. So all magical effects have their DCs increased by +5, right? You could do something like that. Or, hey, whenever you cast a spell of any level beyond 0, you roll a d10, and if you roll that level or below, you've just caused a chaos image. So if you cast a second level spell, roll a d10. If you roll a 1 or 2, here's my chaos magic table or something where something happens. Maybe there's another world where magic is very easy, to the point where it might even be subconscious, and make a roll. Why? Because you might accidentally cast a spell. I didn't want to. Doesn't matter. Yep. Yeah, like Rickard says, like, oh yeah, youngin' pirates, we don't talk to your kind. Come back when you're more infamous. Talking about infamy, right? Where you go to a place where it's better for you to be more of a criminal than a hero, right? And the old pally sitting in the background with their you know with their smitey sword, and all the PCs are like, dude, put the sword down. But I want to smite something. You're like, listen, it's not for you this time. Wear the black cloak. I don't want to wear a black cloak. Right? I mean, that might be the case. Go to a city of thieves where it's far better to sneak around and backstab people, right? Let's go back to Star Wars. Han Solo fit in a whole lot better in Mos Eisley on Tatooine than our intrepid heroes, Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan, right? But when they leave, what happens? Han Solo doesn't really fit in with his scoundrel-like ways when he deals with other people who are far more, maybe not law-abiding, but more oath-taking, let's say. Deadman says Legend of the Five Rings used honor heavily for some factions. Exactly. As a matter of fact, who's to say, on one hand, the player characters may have a lot of gold, and they go, we've got gold, we can buy anything we want. They go to another world, and gold means nothing without honor. And so maybe you can't buy anything you want. You can only get things because of, well, your honor or your or your exploits. Maybe it's very stereotypically Viking-like, where it's measured in things are measured in your exploits. Prove to me you are who you are, or you are what you are in battle or in the courts of intrigue, based on merit, a merit system, right? Much like honor and renown and reputation and infamy. It's we don't know you. You have to prove who and what you are to gain points of merit to advance forward, right? Well, I'm not going to sell you anything unless you show me what you've done. Much like, say, gladiatorial arena things, right? Your personality doesn't matter; it's what your capabilities are. Um, Rickard says, I will say that Obi-Wan knew how to fit in, though. Yeah, I think he was. Well, you're right. Let's just say that um, he was very skilled in knowing where and what was going on, whether he chose to live his lifestyle a particular way, right? And we understand that there are character types that might be like, hey, I could live here. Let's go back with the paladin, right? Oh yeah, I know all about the city of thieves. I just choose not to be there. But in my old days, you know, yeah, I used to run the streets with everybody else. And that might be a really great way, especially if the player characters are able to go back to these little locations where things fit in, especially if the player's like, playing the paladin, and they're like, you know what, I'm a little bored in being the goody two shoes. Man, I sure would like to delve into I picked a criminal background for my character. I sure would love to play upon my criminal background. And even other characters in the group might be going like, you know how to use thieves tools? You're a paladin. I didn't know that. And that might be kind of fun, especially if you want to say, hey guys, my world uses a lot of micro settings so that I can pull on the threads of your background, right? In our real world, how many times have soldiers going gone to one part of our world to do battle, and then when they return home, it's like a different world than the one they've come from and the one they've went to. I can attest, not that I've never been in the military. I can attest to the United States having a lot to do with that, because we've sent soldiers out to, I don't know, jungles during Vietnam. They've sent soldiers into deserts in the Middle East. They've sent soldiers into urban areas, and then those soldiers now have to accommodate themselves to the new location, and then accommodate themselves back to the past location, right? And even I don't believe it was Xanathar's guy, but I do remember listening to one of the Dungeons and Dragons live streams where they were talking about using a rule where, yeah, Rickard says, I will say, speaking of Stallone, I think that's how you get Rambo, right? Rambo is a perfect example. From the first movie, Rambo's walking down the road with his long hippie hair, and he goes to the small town, and the sheriff is like, you need to get the hell out of here. Yeah, long-haired hippie Vietnam vet like looking person, put you in the back of the car. And that's how Rambo starts, right? Rambo comes from one civilization, goes to the micro world where he has to use other capabilities, comes back, and things change. In one of the Dragon live streams, they were talking about, during character advancement, having the option of reducing certain skills to increase other skills on a point-for-point basis. So, for example, maybe Rambo says, you know what? I know my charisma is probably only about a 11, maybe a 12 or 13, and I've got maybe persuasion or something and deception, but I'm going to need my athletic skills and stealth skills. So I'm going to reduce, I've got 3 points in those. I'm going to reduce those 3 points and put 2 points in stealth and 1 point in athletics, right? Okay, so, but then when he gets back to society, now he doesn't have those persuasion skills any longer, right? And I suppose in a micro world type setting, if you wanted to do this long range, like a campaign, I could see player characters, the paladin going into the city of thieves, and over a period of time, having some of their skill sets reduce over time because they're gaining other skill sets where they're at. Um, yeah, Ricker says, yeah, he sure doesn't have persuasion skills. Think his knife is his persuasion skill? Yeah. Players like, um, I know my character was a stand up soldier in the military. Can I switch that over? And like, yeah, you sure can. That's not a knife. This is a knife. Although that's Crocodile Dundee. But yeah, I think his knife is a very very useful persuasion skill. I am deaf. Now, um, one of the great things about having micro world settings, much like Rifts or um, Spelljammer or anything with dimensional portals like Planescape or something, is is the fun of having a hodgepodge of things put together by a bunch of different characters who all come together for a similar goal, even though they are in some way scatterbrained throughout the world. Much like the Guardians of the Galaxy, finding like maybe the player characters go to another world where magic items aren't magic items at all, but they're living creatures. And so maybe one character has a strange living tentacle like thing stuck on their shoulder that gives them a capability. And maybe they go to another place and I don't know, the rogue learns some kind of psychic skill from some kind of psychic mentor, and then they go to another place where the the druid learns to shape change into, I don't know, a solid stone statue because they went to the elemental plane of earth where they have druids there, and so you could have, along with the difficulties of navigating these different worlds and different rule sets and different narratives, basically a world of chaos, they can also acquire rewards that collectively is amazing, but on their own are kind of bizarre and kind of strange. If the player characters go to a completely naturalistic world where there literally are no civilizations except for like nomadic tribes, maybe in that place they acquire healing salves made of like chewed up roots that are spit into leaves, and you take the leaf and you wrap it around your wound and it heals you. Whereas maybe they go to another realm where they have tubes of thick golden liquid that course through their veins to heal a wound. And then they go to yet a third realm where they find these black gemstones that when they blow on them slightly, they spin and float through the air, and they float over top of an injured party, and slowly and surely they drain away the harm, their wounds healing, but the pain being absorbed into the black gemstones as they turn gray and eventually ivory and then crumble to dust or something. Like, you could reskin, reflavor, reuse many of these things. Dead man. Rambo's arrows. Explosive arrowheads. Explosive arrow torque tips were an accessory to John Rambo's compound bow and were featured prominently in Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo Part 3. Yeah, pretty bad. Although, I will say the movie, what's the one where he gets on the Gatling gun and basically takes a 50 cal and blows people away? Was that one just called Rambo? Anyway, pretty nasty stuff there. I love it. Although I have, oh wait, the latest Rambo is on release and I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't talk too much, but you can kill a lot of stuff. And also when using, yeah, Mr. Anderson says Rambo 4. That's the one. Yeah, thank you for popping in there, Mr. Anderson. If I could sarcastically refer to your name, Mr. Anderson, although that was spoken by Mr. Smith when he was referring to Neo. Yes, Mr. Anderson. Thank you very much for joining me, by the way. We have come to the end of today. We didn't quite design a real micro world because I think we have a lot to choose from. But I did want to bring up the reasons why we would use them, because maybe we're bored. Maybe your players are looking for something new. Maybe we just want to change, or heck, we bought a 500-page book. Maybe we want to flip to some of those chapters of those books because we haven't used them in, I don't know, forever, right? So that might be an option. Also, maybe we just want to change the dynamics of certain things, right? Maybe in a world where hitting people about the head and shoulders and punching them in the throat, we want to do more of a court intrigue Game of Thrones. And so it's more important to talk your way out of things. And the players agree to such a thing. So those are the good reasons. But we want to watch out for the pitfalls, right? Some players, whether they admit it or not, may not want to deal with keeping track of rations, or keeping track of rations, or measuring measuring how much food and water they have, or collecting their arrows after a battle or something like that. Maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they just want the narrative portion of it. So just be aware that tomorrow is Third Pillar Thursday, third pillar of exploration. Shh, don't tell anybody. And you guys know I am the self-appointed third pillar-ist of gaming. This is where we get to talk about the environment. I tried to hold off as much as I could because I want to save it for then. But you guys know what I'm going to talk about. I know for you long-termers, you already know what I'm going to do. But yes, tomorrow is where we talk about the third pillar of gaming. Of course, with social interaction and combat being the other two pillars. But guys, anyway, thank you very much. Please like, share, subscribe, share out the channel, whatever. Let people know that we're here every day, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, my time. Thank you very much for participating. Please join in live. And thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a great and positive and safe day. See ya. Bye.